I'm Marcus Coward, and this is Wake Up New Bedford. I'm here with Hendrick Hernandez-Resto.
Thank you for having me.
Hendrick, it's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
And so, it's hard not to know you if you're from this area or if you've been online at all. But for the people who may not know you, and just for some context for some people who do, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and we'll start there and we'll have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
But sure, are you from New Bedford?
I was born in Carolina, Puerto Rico.
Okay.
On the island of Puerto Rico. My entire family before my generation lived there. And we've been island people from the Caribbean our whole existence. And then my mother didn't feel that Puerto Rico at the time was a great place to raise children. So her and my stepfather made their way to New Bedford, Massachusetts, of all places. And my stepfather at the time had an aunt here. She lived in Presidential Heights. So when we got here, we moved to Presidential Heights. And then from Prezi, as we call it, I moved over to Mount Pleasant Street, from Mount Pleasant Street over to Satellite Village. And that's really, really, really where I got like my life to get, like my good life, right? Like, we were children. We didn't have any semblance of what we were living in or where we were living. And then we got to Satellite. And the school was up the street, the supermarket was around the corner. It's very, very felt segregated, but we loved the North End. And then from there, I've been living in New Bedford my whole life. I have 2 children here. My wife and I met here in New Bedford High School. I graduated New Bedford High in 2006. And it's been my life's passion to make a stake in New Bedford. And I prayed every day that it would be one of positivity.
Sure.
I was lucky enough to get a great network, to run into people like Eric Andrade, Stanley Dominique. Treatment on Demand really set me forth. Third Eye really put me on my path. And ever since then, I've been lucky enough to have enough self-awareness to navigate the field the way I wanted to. It wasn't always a field for rappers, and that's really primarily my main discipline, is being an MC. And I've just wanted to make sure that I stomped my foot into the pavement hard enough for them to remember me.
Sure.
And I feel like that's something that's happening right now, and this is a microcosm of that.
And so I'm always curious for people who move from out of the country to the U.S. and land in New Bedford. Was that ever explained to you as far as for how they picked New Bedford specifically?
This is a story that I think I have the same experience with when I ask people who come up from like Alabama or from like Philadelphia, how did you get here? Why New Bedford?
Yes, exactly.
We don't have an answer. I generally don't get an answer from other people. And I definitely never truly got an answer from my parents. We had family here. I don't know how that family got here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then we came and just made a connection with them and then figured it out with the Latino community that was already here. My parents learned to speak English in a year. They were quick about it.
Okay.
I remember my pediatrician saying, I remember you, because I brought my son to him. And he's like, I remember you and I remember your mother. Your mother came in 1 year speaking Spanish and I spoke to her in Spanish. The next year she demanded I speak to her in English because she knew English and I had never really seen that.
Wow.
So we were, and it's crazy to think about. My mom was in her early 20s. She was a child in my mind.
Yeah.
And she had 3 kids and she moved to a country where she didn't know the language or the customs. She had never seen snow or cold weather. And they figured it out. Her and my stepfather figured it out. And I'm grateful for that. But I can't give you an exact reason why we came to New Bedford, but I can tell you all my whys for not leaving.
Sure.
I mean, the arts and culture scene here is something that I've become privy to over the last 3 years, and it's made a place in my heart where I've always loved New Bedford. Hip hop taught me to do that. I remember hearing like Dre and Snoop and everybody represent their areas, and those were hard areas to live in.
For sure.
Right? Like Nas from Queens, and Jay from Brooklyn, and even Bone Thugs and Harmony being from, I believe they're from Denver, right? And they were coming from neighborhoods that were not great, and there wasn't a lot to really be proud of, but they found things to be proud of. And I remember looking at New Bedford and saying, it's not even close to that. How come I can't be proud? And hip hop culture taught me to be very proud of where I'm from. And it's not, I don't want to not expand my wings, but it'd be hard for somebody to take me out of New Bedford because I have everything that I could ever want at my fingertips.
Okay. And when you first came here, we now know that the Latino and Hispanic community is very large in New Bedford. Was it already like that by the time you came, or has it just grown since you've been here?
It's grown exponentially.
Yeah.
As a Puerto Rican, I think that a lot of us still need we have a lot of work to do, Puerto Rico. Like, we got some work to do. My Central American and South American brothers and sisters have found a way, and I'm proud of them. The avenue is vibrant and full with that culture. And as a Latino, it took me a long time to accept all Latino culture as my culture. We have Lorenzo's, but there's more that needs to happen within the Puerto Rican community. Outside of that, if we're just looking at it as a whole, the Latinx community in New Bedford has grown exponentially. And no, it was not like that. There wasn't just Latino businesses up and down the Ave or throughout the South End. There was no Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Right, there was none of that. Not that I can remember. And now those are things people like Vaughn Marie Maniz. There we go, Vaughn. I'm sorry. I love you. And Guilherme Santiago, who provide extremely vital services to the Latinx community. The Community Economic Development Center with Corinne Williams and Brian Pastore, who provide exponential help to the Latinx and immigrant communities. Those businesses, those organizations weren't established, and that community was not established. And because they are, we are. So, so much love and so much appreciation for them. But no, coming here, New Bedford has had a massive facelift and a cultural lift over the past 30 years. And it's day and night. If you fell asleep in 1992 and you woke up now, which I'm sure is the same for most places, but not all. You would not only see the facelift, but you would feel a cultural shift in the city. So no, it was not the same, and I'm proud that it isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Ever evolving, while still keeping some history and culture that keeps it.
Exactly. We don't like to drift too far from New Bedford. Is somebody, I think it was Jeff Angeli, who posted it a couple of days ago on social media. He's like live from the greatest city in the country, and I felt that thoroughly. Because historically, it's been one that lit the world, that revolutionized whaling, with Lewis Temple being a black man who revolutionized Temple with the Temple Toggle harpoon, changed whaling. Right, most of the whalemen at that time were of Cape Verdean descent or black men, right? And they put their lives and livelihood on the line to revolutionize and bring New Bedford what it needed, and it became the richest city per capita in the world. And even right now, we're the richest seaport in the United States, right? We bring in the most money, and it's just a beautiful thing. But we don't let go of those things, and I'm proud that we don't. People like Paul Cuffey's name rings true, right? Frederick Douglass rings true. Amilcar Cabral, Dr. Jabril Kazan, those people made a stake in New Bedford because it's so historically inclined. Never lets them go. I'd love to see it continue to do that for our current revolutionaries and our current tastemakers and change makers.
So you're very well educated when it comes to New Bedford history, and I have to give you your props on that.
Thank you.
Because so many people in New Bedford aren't even. I was talking to Eldrick Abreu, and he just let me in on a fact of Gomes School that was named after
Alfred
a veteran.
Gomes?
Yes.
Yep.
And so there's so much history that we just are used to, but don't dig into, people who are from here.
We normalize that a lot. The schools are named after a lot of great people, right? A lot of great local people. We might have Lincoln School that I think is named after Abraham Lincoln, but outside of that, I think all the other schools are named after people from New Bedford. I was lucky enough to, in my quadrennium at New Bedford High School, to be able to take a course that was called The History and Culture of New Bedford.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
So it wasn't around for a long time, but it was there. It was an elective. And I saw it on a piece of paper. I saw it on the electives, and I said, oh, all day.
All day.
All day.
Yeah.
I love New Bedford. I mean, I have tattoos of New Bedford. I have the harpoon. I have a whale.
That's lit.
I have Seagull Cinderella on me.
Wow.
These are all things that I feel are representative of the city, but one of the things that I learned in that class was the level of greatness that New Bedford just instinctively had during the civil rights movement, shutting down Kempton Street. Right, and just doing what they needed to do to get their voices out. The abolitionist passed, even though some of that abolitionist past gets shaky. I mean, there was abolitionists here, but what I've learned is that they still looked at the African American as inferior. But there was still freedom here.
Yeah.
A lot of the houses that are still standing have underground railroad routes and rooms and passages. So that made me super proud. When learning about New Bedford, one of the things that I learned that made me the most proud was when the slavers would come into town, we would ring bells to let everybody know that they're here and they're looking, and we would not open our doors to them. They could not stay within our hotels and our inns. They could not eat at our places. We knew who you were. And the city was very tight-knit, and we made sure that they were unwelcomed. And I know that times may change, and I know that even right now the climate doesn't feel that way, but New Bedford's not that place. And New Bedford's not a place to come with that energy.
Yep. And so I'm now a part of the Human Rights Commission, okay? And
Salute.
A regular that we have is the Assistant Deputy Chief, Scott Corolla, okay? And he lets us know that the police are very much on the side of the Latinx and the immigrant community, in that on their watch, there's not gonna be, any raids or anything, and that they want to increase the trust with those communities and let them know that the police are on their side. So it just reminds me of how tight-knit we've always been, and that we're continuing that tradition.
Yeah, as a Puerto Rican, right, and I still feel as an immigrant, right, as somebody who's Caribbean indigenous, even though I'm here as a citizen, naturalized or whatever term may be, I will always feel like an immigrant, regardless of my status. Watching my people live in fear is something that's been making me sick to my stomach. It's amazing to hear that we have support from law enforcement, but that type of energy affects our business and our economy here, because the Latinx community has a powerful dollar. We make things move, and businesses along the corridor of the avenue are feeling the effects of hearing things like that there's possible ICE raids. And there was somebody who was detained recently right next to Charlie's on the Ave. And this is, the Latinx community is seeing this happen, and they're fearful. And it's something that does affect me, even though it doesn't affect me directly. That's my community. Those are my people. Those are my brothers and sisters. The only difference between me and them is where the slave ship stopped. There's no reason why somebody from Puerto Rico and somebody from South America should be speaking Spanish. Those are languages that were bestowed upon us while our own traditions and cultures were stripped away. The erasure of Caribbean indigenous culture is one of the most successful erasures in history. We have so little left. We have so little knowledge. Our gold was taken and brought to Europe, and that funded the European and the Ottoman empires, right? Those are artifacts and just art that we made in gold. The rivers overflowed with golds in Puerto Rico. That's why it's called the rich port. So regardless of the United States having territorial ownership over the island of Puerto Rico, the connection that we feel with our Cuban, our Dominican, our Guatemalan, our South Salvadorian brothers, our Chilean brothers, our Argentinian brothers is stronger now than it's ever been, and what happens to them happens to us.
And so you talking about that erasure of that Caribbean culture really reminded me of Taino ties. And I am so grateful and proud that I got to witness that performance and, meet Emilio, and just that he was able to share that history and still keep that alive, even though we don't talk about it enough, that for some people it still is living within them and continuing that tradition.
Emilio Torrado is the reason why I say Caribbean indigenous. As much as I love saying Puerto Rico, that's a title and a label that was bestowed upon us by conquistadors, by colonizers. Puerto Rico was not a term that the indigenous people of the island came up with. We were Tainos, we're Boricuas, and Emilio Torrado is an essential piece of why I feel that way. That's my brother. And I love him very much, and I tell him that all the time. that ideology that he bestowed upon me is ideology I brought to my parents, who didn't, for some reason or another, and my mother and I have this conversation all the time, there wasn't a lot of knowledge passed down about our culture. Traditions, yes. Dia de los Reyes, coquito, the food, the music, El Gran Combo, and Tito Puente, and Hector Lavoe. We got those stories. We did not get the stories of our natives and how they fought. We did not get the stories of what happened when Cristobal Colon came to the island. We did not get those. I did not as a child. I grew up and the internet taught me what happened to my people.
Yeah.
And then I went to my mother and I was like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And she goes, yeah. And I go, how could you confirm something that you have never taught me, Mom? Like, what are we talking about here? She's like, honey, it just never came up. And speaking to my elder Latinx community, it's something that's continuously happened with that generation of Latinx immigrants. Assimilation was important. And fitting in and making sure that we didn't stick out like sore thumbs so that we wouldn't get denied what we needed to survive was more important at that time than letting us know that our natives fought back and that we had a saying called ayi aya bombe, which meant better dead than a slave. We stopped farming. We stopped showing the colonizers how to use the land. And we got sick, they got sick. But we showed them, you're not running us. You're not doing this to us. Their power of germs, guns, and steel was far more powerful than what we had. And for a time being, hundreds and hundreds of years, centuries, they were successful. We are on an uprising right now. The Latinx uprising, the Caribbean indigenous uprising, and the self-representation and the idealization that we are who we really are has come thoroughly over the last couple of years. And I'm proud of my island brothers and sisters for realizing that we're much more than just a really pretty island with some nice looking people who make some good food.
Sure.
It's good to know that we're starting to remind ourselves of our Taino roots.
Well put.
Thank you.
And so when you first came here, what was the first school you went to? Do you remember?
Oh man, yes.
Okay.
I went to Condon School in the South End off of Rivet Street. That's now a living facility, I believe.
Oh, really?
I went to, years and years ago, I was driving for Primo's, who's right off of Rivet Street, and I was delivering pizzas, and I got to go into the school. And then there's another school off of Rivet Street, a little bit up the ways, and I forget what that was. I forget the name of it. But that school's still standing there, and it's still in elementary school. I went there, but the very first real memories that I had of like elementary school were at Elwin G. Campbell School in the North End, next to Trukey's, next to Satellite. I went there from 2nd grade to 6th grade, and I was in bilingual courses for a while, and then they moved me over to regular English classes. I remember being moved over to like a regular English class because I knew the language well enough, and throughout the years, I lost some of that Spanish, and then I started working at Rite Aid Pharmacy on Purchase Street, which is no longer there. And I had to regain some of that Spanish because the clientele was a little bit under 30% Spanish speaking, but we had more than enough people who did not speak English well enough.
Yeah, sure.
And that became a place where I had to reconnect with my roots very, 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 very thoroughly.
That's so interesting. Like what a random place for that to happen.
Yes. Healthcare. I was a healthcare professional for so long, for more than 10 years. It was at Rite Aid, and then from there I went on to work at the health department under an initiative called Shift. From there I went on to the health center, and I was working at the Greater New Bedford Community Health Center, and I was working at the infectious disease department with a lot of people who had infectious diseases. Like HIV was one of the things that that was really the big initiative that we were under. That was the grant that I was working under. And a lot of my people were under that umbrella, a lot of Spanish speaking, some Puerto Rican, some of all kinds.
You brought up treatment on demand, and so that was started by Brian Ribeiro, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So
it was. I know there was a Ribeiro family member that started that. Yes.
Yeah. Because I read his book about. I just wanted to make sure that was
So treatment on demand came and got. So treatment on demand had something. There's this trend going on TikTok. What radicalized you? Treatment on demand had a program at New Bedford High School, and we called it the Hip Hop Club. But it
Okay.
was more like the Black Panther Party's breakfast program.
Yeah, okay.
Where they, not that they were providing us food, but the breakfast program was a place where they fed children and then they gave them the knowledge. Right? They slid it in there.
Yeah.
And Hip Hop Club was a place where we were doing hip hop things, but they were feeding us knowledge.
Okay.
And Treatment on Demand was the team that went to New Bedford High to do this. It was Eric Andrade, it was Stanley Dominique, it was Justin Langlois, it was Damien Cyron, it was Tem Blessed, it was Nancita, it was Sabrina Padilla. All of those people were in the building bestowing knowledge upon us, teaching us how the slave trade started, they brought people from the Jamaican community in Brockton who were so interconnected that they homeschooled, they grew all their own food, they only
Wow.
went to their own markets, they
Interesting.
only hired their own people. It was so beautiful to hear those people speak and teach us things, and then they took us to AS220 and to poetry readings. We did an album together there, and that's where I first got to record and put my vocals on wax. And then Treatment on Demand sought me out for employment to work with to continue their youth program. And so I got to work with the North Star Learning Center, and they were located on County Street at the time. And we did a lot of work from there. I went on to do some like odd and end jobs that weren't community based. And then working back in healthcare, I realized I'm best served serving my community. And then ending up at New Bedford Creative and continuing to do community-based type work, but in arts and culture, it really brought everything full circle.
And so we have about 5 minutes left.
Yes.
And so we'll talk a lot more about your music in the second part,
Okay.
because obviously that's a huge part of what you do right
Yes.
now. But to wrap up with part one, I would like to talk to you about that you worked in the healthcare for so long in that industry. So was that always what you set your career sights on, or how did you find yourself in that field?
Tony Roberts was the manager of the pharmacy for Rite Aid on Purchase Street. His wife was Joanne Roberts, and Joanne Roberts worked with my mother at a nursing home. Joanne Roberts was, I believe, a registered nurse, and my mom was a certified nurse's assistant. She had mentioned that Tony was looking for a pharmacy tech. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I was just out of high school. I
Sure.
didn't know what I was going to do.
Okay.
I had this idea in my head that at the time felt, over time ended up feeling like a delusion, where I was like, I'm going to become a rapper. So I'm not going to, I'm not going to bog myself down with other stuff. But I needed a good job.
Sure.
And Tony Roberts gave me the opportunity to work in the pharmacy. And then I got in there and I realized I could leverage this to go to something else.
Okay.
And then from there, Rite Aid actually gave me a promotion and made me a wellness ambassador. And again, I thought I can leverage this to something else. I saw a job with the health department and Stephanie Harrington Sloan and Jamie Berberina. I love name dropping if you don't know. Those two women gave me the opportunity to get started in something called Shift, and we were helping people with asthma, high blood pressure, and diabetes management. We were educating them around those things. Then I went to the health center, on the health center side of that initiative, because they were the community partner.
Yeah.
And started working there with them. But no, I never thought that. And then eventually I became a community health worker. I was the Community Health Worker of the Year for the state of Massachusetts and Rhode Island in 2018.
Wow.
So my family has always been community-based people. We've always been rooted in the community and helping the community. My wife is a community health worker / family planner. My mother is the lead community health worker at the health center now. And it's something that we've just always loved and we've always been part of. I think the universe and God brought me to that because they were like, this is where you belong for right now. Get in where you fit in. And I always tell people behind the closed door, I'm nowhere near as humble as I am outside of it. And I wanted to be Michael Jordan in that field. And I did my very best to make sure that I not only served my community, but that I marketed myself in a way that I can continue to leverage what I did so that I could benefit myself and my family and my community.
Interesting. And because you keep using this word leverage, and that's very business minded of
Yes.
you. Where did you, and we have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Where did you learn about that motivation to keep leveling yourself up?
I was always a sports fan, and the era that I grew up in was the era of Kobe and post Jordan and Garnett and Duncan and Paul Pierce and the Celtics, and I'm a massive Celtics fan, so I got to learn about Larry Bird.
You're definitely a massive Celtics fan.
Oh, massive film, huge Celtics fan.
Lee Green for sure. Yeah.
But it turned into a situation where I saw greatness around me. The Red Sox were starting to win. The Patriots were winning.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, why can't I? There's something in the water in New England. I'm here. So can't I be great? I want to be great. I feel great. I want more. I can't just sit still. I need more. And some people are comfortable where they're at. And I don't knock people for being comfortable. I just want to keep running. And I don't know how to not run. So I want what's next and I want what's better.
Just like that Timothy Chalamet quote.
Just like the Timothy Chalamet quote.
That makes so much sense.
I know the classy thing isn't to say that I'm shooting for greatness, but I am continuously trying to put the ball in the hoop and turn around and look at the crowd and be like, I told you.
Yep.
I told you. So it was the sports, but it was also just the figures around me in hip hop that just kept telling me that they were amazing. I know he's controversial now, but Kanye West was one of the reasons why I thought I could be better.
Wow.
Because he kept saying that he was the greatest, but he never told me that I wasn't. And no, he's controversial now.
Yeah.
But at that time, Kanye made me feel very empowered.
Absolutely. And just, all of these athletes or musicians can be controversial, but it doesn't take away from their inspiration that they gave you.
They can be controversial, but it doesn't always take away from their contribution, is what I say.
Yes. Great point. Great point.
Thank you.
And so in the second part, we can definitely talk about music. Would you say you're a poet?
I would say that, yes. I was talking to Eric Andrade yesterday, and he was like, you've been a poet since you've picked up the mic and since you picked up the pen. Stop, you don't have to label yourself a rapper, big dog. You are a poet. I would, a spoken word artist, right? But definitely an MC, and I never want to let go of those terms because I feel like some people might stigmatize them, and I want to break that stigma down.
I love that.
Thank you.
Especially because that's part of what I'm trying to do in New Bedford too is break that stigma. We're not a negative place, we're a very positive place.
Absolutely.
With so much creativity and so much history that we just have to help promote it and maybe market it a little bit more than all this negative news that is just taking over modern media.
It's on us. It's our responsibility to get the good news out there because the media outlets are going to do their very best to hit the clickbait button.
Yep.
And the responsibility of the good news falls on us who are doing the good work.
Yes.
We need to make our voices heard.
Yeah.
There's a way to connect with media. There's press releases. There's shaking hands and networking at events. There's getting to know who's who so that when you build relationships and when good things happen, your name pops up and they go, I know so-and-so. I know who that is. Yeah, that's a good thing. Let's run it.
Yeah.
So it's on us. It's on us and it's on us to get the good news out there. As much as we complain about what happens in New Bedford, we got to bring up the good stuff.
We do. And so watch us in part 2 as we continue this conversation about Hendrick's art, which I somewhat purposely left for part 2, but we just had too much to talk about. So thank you for part 1. This has been Wake Up New Bedford with Hendrick Hernandez-Resto, and catch us in part 2 where we continue this conversation. Peace.